All right, welcome back. Stupid versus spread. Pretty good week. College football week 6 is in the books. We are talking week 7. Going to be a shorter episode than usual, so bear with us. But should be a good time talking. Got some great matchups this week, and some really like head turners for the next. Really, this is a critical week for some teams, and we'll get into that. Mike, you wanted to talk about some impressive and, as you put it, depressive teams. Give me your impressive teams because we had the same talking pre-show. We had the same kind of idea of who really performed well this week. So I'm curious to talk about a little and see who you thought had the most impressive of your impressive teams.
Yeah, four teams stood out to me. Tennessee going on the road to LSU and doing what I said they would, so I want credit for me. The LSU crowd walked into that game. LSU fumbled the kickoff, and
Can't do that.
it was over immediately. It was 7-0 before LSU could have any of their gumbo. That game was over immediately. Texas, I think this is more indicative of just an absolute mess on the coaching staff at Oklahoma right now
Yep.
without a quarterback. But Texas did look good. Quinn Ewers is the real deal. I would say I'm going to change this. Texas wasn't the impressive part of this. Quinn Ewers is legit. And he's going to be an incredible quarterback. Because you could make the argument he's not even really healthy right now. And to do what he did on Saturday was it, incredibly impressive. And you combine that with the fact that he looked really good in the Alabama game before he got knocked out of that one. I think he's legit, and he's going to, I think, bring Texas not back, maybe
Maybe
back.
back. Okay.
Um, UCLA is the next team on this list. We've both been very high on Utah. We both thought Utah was going to go into this game, win, and set up, the stage for next week against you or this week coming up against USC.
Yeah.
Uh, but they got caught in a. I don't know if they got caught in a look ahead spot or if UCLA is just really that good. But UCLA didn't just win that game, in a close one that could have gone either way. UCLA
Hmm.
dominated Utah, um, and made that look fairly easy for a team that we have said has been a very good team, top 15 sort of team this year. And then Mississippi State, Arkansas has been in kind of a rut ever since the Texas A&M game.
Yeah.
And they didn't have KJ Jefferson this week, but I think the impressive part to me is that Mississippi State they look like they've found something on offense, and their defense is playing really well. And they're sort of answering the question of how good could Mike Leach be if his teams played defense, which right now it appears is pretty good. So I would not be shocked if they're by the time they should if Levis plays, the Kentucky matchup this week is a little bit more interesting. But if he's out again, Mississippi State should take care of business at Kentucky and then set up a very interesting stretch for them and a really, really fun Egg Bowl, unless Will Rogers isn't healthy. But if he is, the Egg Bowl is going to be a lot of fun this year. Out of those, I would say I think Tennessee is up there. I think it's UCLA. So I kind of thought Tennessee was the better team and they should go into LSU and win this game despite the environment. UCLA, I didn't see measuring up, especially with the way they had played this year. They beat South Alabama on a last second field goal. They looked really good against Washington, but we'll talk about Washington in a second.
Yeah.
Um, but nobody on their schedule so far for UCLA had impressed me, and to go out and do what they did to Utah, I think was an indication that DTR looks like he is the truth for them. Charbonnet is a great running back, and that they are actually the team that's going to be the toughest matchup for USC possibly in the Pac-12 this year. So I give UCLA a lot of credit, and we obviously have our grudges with Chip Kelly, but that was a very impressive performance.
Yeah. I think if I'm of those 4 teams that you mentioned, I think they all had pretty impressive performances. I don't know. I want to give Utah I want to give UCLA credit, but I think Utah really is still pretty good. I think they fell short in two matchups this year, and that's going to kick them out of the playoff contention, and that stinks because I really did think this was maybe their year to like really put forth the effort to get there. Um, what impressed me, I mean, Texas. Right, Oklahoma might be bad. We're going to talk about them in a second. I mean, Quinn Ewers went 21 for 31, almost 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and an interception. Like that's insane, and they still got like 200 yards in the ground running, and another 3 touchdowns on the ground running. So Texas impressed me. I don't think it was all on Quinn Ewers. I do give Texas themselves the credit. I hadn't been high on them, but having seen how Ewers plays and like the stretch of teams that he's had to play as such a young quarterback, I yeah, you don't want to say that they're back, but it almost feels like with this being, you know, early in his career for Ewers, Texas might be set up for the long haul pretty well in the next coming years. And to handle Oklahoma like that, I thought was very impressive. I think Texas is a top 15 team when Ewers is healthy. And I think obviously Texas is in the 4-2 spot because Ewers was not healthy. I think objectively you could say that they beat Alabama if he doesn't go out of that game in the first quarter. Tennessee also is shaping up. I'm looking at teams now that are like contenders outside of Alabama and Georgia for the SEC, and we'll talk about Mississippi State. But I think Tennessee and Mississippi State are those other two teams that can really call it and can really put it into contention. So I'm excited to see how Tennessee plays. UCLA again, they played very well. I thought Utah would do a lot better. I thought they would perform a lot better. I didn't think it was a look ahead spot, so I thought they would get the best of the best, and they really didn't. Which we'll get into later because the line for the USC game against Utah is very confusing. But honestly, of the four, I think Texas impressed me the most, and then Tennessee and Mississippi State kind of tied because they really did have two breakaway weeks where you could kind of see that in the SEC there's four teams that you really would say are in contention at this point. Okay. What are your depressive teams? Because I have four and you have three. We talked about three, but I'm going to add Utah to that fourth. But I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I guess I categorize this as depressive because there were some. I would say Utah's performance was uninspiring and kind of disappointing, but these performances are downright depressing. Oklahoma going into the Red River game, I understand that Dylan Gabriel was knocked out, but to get goose egged and give up 49 um, to your biggest rival in a series you've dominated for since basically like 2010.
Yeah.
Um, Coming off the heels of losing Lincoln Riley and trying to reestablish an identity under Brent Venables, really just a terrible look for them. And now they're 3-3, and they have to compete in a Big 12 this year that is not going to be as forgiving as it would be in any other year.
No.
With the way Kansas is playing, with the way TCU is playing, with the team we know Baylor is, with the way sorry, I had another team. Oh yeah, Baylor, TCU, Oklahoma State. They're gonna have to go into Bedlam and figure out a way to be competitive against a very good Oklahoma State team. West Virginia's frisky, so Iowa State's frisky. So like there's not going to be easy games left on their schedule. So Brent Venables and you give up 49. You could make the argument that he doesn't have his guys, right? But giving up 49 feels like it's a little bit more than not having your guys when you're at Oklahoma. You could make that
Yeah.
argument if you were at like a lower Power 5 team or at an FCS school. But if you're at Oklahoma and your defensive players are giving up 49 and really not looking competitive at all, that feels like it's more on the coaching. So,
Yeah,
uh,
and they got dominated on both sides of the ball.
yeah,
Like I just read off the stats. Like that wasn't like, oh, they just aired it out completely. No, they got also 200 yards on the ground and three touchdowns. So
yeah.
yeah, tough.
Kentucky less depressing than the other two, I would say, just because Will Levis was obviously out of this game. But just depressing in the fact that they lost to South Carolina, and it's depressing for a Kentucky fan base that was very high on their expectations this year, and especially coming off the Florida win, and you go into Ole Miss with a couple really good chance. I mean, a ton of chances to win that game, and you fumble it away. Levis gets hurt, and then you come home, come back to the East Coast, and you drop a game to South Carolina that takes you out of really meaningful contention for anything other than playing spoiler down the stretch here against Tennessee and Georgia. So I would say depressive for them in the fact that they just now that's what they have to get themselves up for, which kind of sucks. Levis will go to the draft this year, and what could have been a possibly a season where you finish second in the East and go to a New Year's Six bowl and have a really marquee season for Kentucky. Kind of goes down the drain there, and then Washington. Maybe this is just a regression to the mean for them, but to lose to an Arizona State team that you and I have just been basically shutting our eyes and picking against every single
Yeah,
week is not a resounding endorsement of where they are as a team.
I would say
Um,
embarrassing, but yeah.
yeah, and and you get he I forget what the interim coach's name, but he gets his first win there, and I think maybe depressive by association. How bad is Michigan State that they got dominated at Washington?
Dude,
And
they are
that's
very
that
bad.
Washington team now lost to Arizona State, and they on top of that they got blown out the same day by Ohio State, which is not in and of itself depressing. I mean, it's crazy how everybody went into this year saying Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to win the Blitnikoff. He hasn't played since week one,
Mm-hmm.
and it appears Marvin Harrison Jr. is actually going to win the Blitnikoff on his same team because he has 9 touchdowns, and the Iowa offense has 7. Um, so he's doing better than other Big Ten total teams by himself. Um,
That's a good
but
point.
but a depressive, a very depressing performance for Washington, and kind of put them back where we thought they were going into the season. So yeah, of those, I mean, the easy answer here is Oklahoma. There's no way you can go into that game and hold on to anything, walking out of a 49-0 ass kicking the way that game went.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't really have too much on the other two. I want to add Utah to that just because I giving up 42 to UCLA, like UCLA, I don't know that is as good as their rank suggests, and we'll find out because after this coming week they play Oregon. That's an 11 versus 12 ranked matchup. I think that'll be interesting. And then their last real two big games or games I think they maybe could lose is they play USC mid November and then finish up with Cal, who has been frisky. They're not good. They've been frisky. I just think
They
if
play
you're
good defense, really good
yeah,
defense.
if you're Utah, you have to go into that game thinking this is a must win. Um, and to give up 42 on defense, I don't think the UCLA offense is terribly explosive. I mean, they've put up 30 or 40 in every game, but before this week, before last week, their opponents were Colorado, South Alabama, Alabama State, and Bowling Green. Not 4 teams. You go, yes, we put up 30 to 40 points, and that's amazing. So I was very shocked to see that they dominated both Utah and Washington. So kudos to them. We'll see if they're for real this week. Oregon's a very good team, and we'll see if they're the bee's knees if they wipe USC and run the table. But I just wanted to add Utah to that because I think you have to go into that game really thinking like, all right, we got to win this. It's not a look ahead; they're ranked, and then you follow it up with USC. Like, there's a chance you're Utah and you fall to 4-3, and that's not great. I mean, if you're Utah, the positive is I don't think you're out of contention just yet for the conference championship, and I think very much still you're in contention for a New Year's Six bowl. So I think that'll be interesting. We'll see how that goes. Um, I think it also speaks maybe a little bit to scheduling better teams. Like they didn't have to schedule Florida week 1. And it sucks because you could have scheduled an FCS team, gotten a win, and UCLA is your first loss, and now you're more or less out of playoff contention. So, all right, let's get into the games of this week. We got 5 like we do every week. We're just going to dive right into them. So, Penn State +7 at Michigan. Over under is 51.5. Noon kickoff. Michael,
Yeah,
ladies.
big noon kickoff, and what I'd like to call a perfect card because we have 5 Power 5 ranked, or sorry, we have 6 Power 5 ranked matchups. We're not going to talk Mississippi State, Kentucky unless it's on your card, but 5 of the 6 are in 5 different conferences. So perfect tour de force of the Power 5 that we'll go through, starting with Penn State, Michigan. Um, Maybe it's recency bias from the Auburn game. Maybe it's Maybelline, but I really like Penn State here.
Hmm.
I've been really impressed with their offense. I think more than anything, their defense hasn't had a tremendous test yet. I don't know that Michigan's offense is a tremendous test. It will certainly be more of a test than they've gotten so far. But I think what the equalizer here is that Penn State has found stability in their offense. Sean Clifford is making good decisions and not keeping them from staying in games or losing them games. Um, and this game was absolute rock fight last year that Penn State lost at home because they couldn't get anything going offensively. In a game that Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo dominated. That is specifically David Ajabo really put himself on the map in that game. I That doesn't seem as likely here, given how Michigan has played against some of the actual competition that they faced on their schedule this year, because they had 5 cupcakes to start the season. But against Maryland, they played a really tough game at home, and then the score line says they beat Indiana 31-10. That game was 13-10, I think, midway in the third quarter. So you put those two together, I don't think anything Michigan has done has been particularly overwhelming. This will be the best defense they've seen, and certainly will be the best offense they've seen. And I'm a big believer in their 2 freshman running backs. So you add all that up. I get the games at Michigan; they're going to be hyped. Big noon kickoff will be there for Fox, but I like Penn State to keep this within the number. I think I think it's up to 7.5 on some in some places. But either way, I think Penn State keeps this within a touchdown. I don't know that they win outright. Um, Michigan may end up pulling this out. But I like Penn State in this spot, and this will be a huge one for the Big Ten East as we get down the stretch here, because we could end up in that weird triangle situation
Yep.
if one of these teams knocks off Ohio State. You could have one of those weird tiebreaker spots coming up.
So I'm on the opposite side here. Um, I have Michigan -7. Should have got it when it opened at 5.5, but oh well. I think Michigan is the best team in the Big Ten. I've seen enough. I
Better
don't.
than Ohio State?
Yeah, I'm gonna call
Wow.
my I'm gonna call my shot right now. I'm probably going to bet Michigan in that matchup. They seem to have kind of all the pieces together. I on on defense they're holding, and granted I get it, they haven't always played the best of teams. But the only time they let over 14 points was Maryland too. We discussed they're kind of frisky. They have been dominant. I think that maybe Harbaugh's kind of figured it out. As far as what he's been missing, he's been able to put together those missing pieces, and I was very impressed to see them house the teams that they've housed the past few weeks, and I think a lot of that is JJ McCarthy. He's like been really impressive, and I know we talked at the beginning of the year like, maybe they're both tied. That was clearly not the case anymore. JJ has come out and just dominated teams, regardless of how good of a defense they have. Even against Iowa, he did. Who has a fantastic defense and a awful offense. They were dominant on offense. They put enough points on the board to impress me. 27 against Iowa is pretty good. So I'm taking Michigan in this because I think Michigan will start to run the table. And I think they will be undefeated, very easily undefeated, until they get to Ohio State. And then I think they'll be dogs because people don't realize how good they are. I also maybe would lean the under. I think these teams have decent defenses. 51.5 seems a little high, so I might thread the needle, but I'm taking Michigan -7 for sure.
All right, we're squared up on that one.
Yeah, Bama -7 at Tennessee over under 66 3:30 SEC kickoff. Michael,
I can't wait to hear Brad Nessler's sweet voice on this game.
mm,
Tennessee's going to be absolutely
amped the fuck up.
bonkers for this game. Um, that being said, I feel like this is where they get their hearts broken. I don't know. I'm trying to find the Bryce Young news for this week. I have a feeling that they held him out because they wanted a chance at getting him on the field for this game more than Texas A&M, and it was a lot closer. Um, so it he is practicing this week is the latest story I can see about 10 hours ago from Alabama.com. Um, so there's a decent shot he plays, um, and I am going to hedge there. But I think the bigger thing is this feels like a classic spot where Saban comes out coming off what you would consider a lackluster performance against the Texas A&M team that they probably should have beaten by more. And granted, they turned the ball over 4 times, with
Mm-hmm.
two of which led to touchdowns for Texas A&M. So you take two of those turnovers away, and that game is not nearly as close as it ended up. Um, I I feel like this is a spot where if this Alabama team is as good as we think they are, they go out and they put up a big score against Tennessee and remind everybody, who they are. Because
Goosebumps.
we Tennessee, I mean, we are also riding off. Tennessee went to LSU and looked very dominant, but this is also a Tennessee team that had to go to overtime to beat Pitt. Um, who lost to Georgia Tech. So I say that the transitive property doesn't work in college football, but it gives you a spectrum of when Tennessee's not on, they're not a juggernaut, and they have found something in the past few weeks. But I think more than anything, this gives me shades of Georgia last year in the SEC championship game, where everybody thought that this was Georgia's time, that they were going to be crowned, and they got their shot to do it in the national championship and did it when it counted. But Nick Saban comes out and just has the perfect game plan. Everything goes right, and they steamroll Tennessee. I like them even with the touchdown here. Um, I think that this is a classic Bama performance. This isn't as much of an indictment on Tennessee. I don't want this to come off as me hating on Tennessee. I just think Tennessee is probably a recruiting cycle or two away from being a true top 10 year in, year out sort of team. Like I said, like Josh Heupel's a good coach. I think Hendon Hooker's a good quarterback. I think they have a good team the way it's assembled right now. They've got great wide receivers. Um, but I think they're a little bit off from being able to win a game like this. So
Okay.
I like Alabama, and we go back to the old adage: you don't get rich betting against Alabama. So I like Alabama in this game.
I lean Tennessee +7, but I'm not going to bet it. I also lean the under. I see it at 66. I think these have pretty good defenses. I would be surprised if both teams allow over 30 or so points. This definitely seems like a 21-28 kind of final. So I lean the under. I know the line has moved for the over, I think, because people are just betting this like crazy. Um,
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to switch my pick there because I don't want to deal with I don't want to
the
deal with.
heartbreak of a backdoor.
Well, I think it's more. I think it's more the. You have it at 66 or 65 and a half.
I see it at 66 on
Okay.
Action app.
Okay.
Anyway,
Either way, I think the only uncertainty I have in whether or not Bama wins, if I knew Young was playing, I think this is a much easier call, and the line probably doesn't drop to where it is right now. But if he doesn't end up playing, the under almost certainly hits at 65. So, and even if Bryce Young does play, I think this under still probably hits. So. I'm going to switch my pick. I like where you are, but I do think Bama wins this game, and I think that there's a chance they do it pretty convincingly.
yeah, yeah. I don't. I might sprinkle Tennessee money line, but anyway, I this will be a game time decision, but I definitely heavily lean the under. If not, actually, we'll bet it. Next game, Oklahoma State +4 at TCU, over under 68. Kickoff 3:30 as well. I This opened as a pick'em, and everyone bet TCU. I think Oklahoma State is outright the better team,
Yes, I completely agree.
and I'm confused because like I have watched Oklahoma State this year, and they have dominated for the most part. Um, their opponents. The only team they didn't like really dominate was Texas Tech last week, and they still won by 10. So I'm confused by that. The Oklahoma State beat Baylor 2 weeks ago, and somehow they're 4-point favorite or dogs against TCU. That in my mind that does not compute. Um, Probably going to hammer Oklahoma State money line. I will definitely be betting Oklahoma State +4 against TCU, and that over under that that seems like an over to me. Um, Oklahoma State has put up the following number of points from week one: 58, 34, 63, 36, and 41. And TCU has done the same. TCU hasn't scored less than 38 points in a game. So this seems like a very obvious over, which is maybe why it's an underplay. But I'm very much confused as to why Oklahoma State is not favored in this game. I think they're probably a top 6 team in the country right now.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State is the better team here. I think TCU is riding a wave of momentum from their victory against
Mm-hmm.
Kansas, which, when you say that sentence out loud, is probably all the proof I need as to why you should be on Oklahoma State in this spot.
Yeah, if you were to take a time travel 6 months back and you're like TCU's riding the high of beating Kansas, you'd be like, okay, good talk, buddy.
Yeah.
Alternate universe, correct. Got it.
Yeah. So when you say it like that, I think the logic here is easy. Take Oklahoma State. I will also be on Oklahoma State points and the money line when I go to Virginia to place these bets.
NC State +3 at Syracuse. Next game, over unders 41.5, which is direly low for a college football game. Kickoff is at 3:30. Um, I don't have a play for this. I have a lean, but so if you have a play, go first.
Yes, I am on the underdog here, which, if nobody has looked at the line, it's NC State, which also doesn't make any sense. Oklahoma State, or sorry, NC State. This is because these are the same. They're both +4, +3.5, depending on where you're looking. Um, NC State is the better team. They went on the road to Clemson and they got beat pretty soundly, which is not anything to scoff at. And then they come home and they beat a tough Florida State team at home. They did something that good teams do, which is get off the mat and win a slugfest against a good team in Florida State. So now they go up to Syracuse, who has played a absolute gauntlet of a schedule, and I will go ahead and pull that up now. But when I rattle
Louisville,
off,
Purdue, UVA. Yeah,
yeah, when I rattle off these football powerhouses, you guys are gonna drop your absolute shirts. Um, Louisville, Connecticut, Purdue, Virginia, and Wagner. Um,
they've covered all but one of those to their credit.
yeah, that's fair, and like, um, Sure, they covered Virginia when I thought Virginia was gonna fix their offense, and they didn't. They deserve to be ranked. Syracuse is having a great year. I'm not gonna poo-poo them. They came out and they smoked a Louisville team that we now know is really bad. And they beat Purdue. And I think out of the teams they beat, Purdue is probably their best win.
Yeah, most
Uh,
impressive.
yeah, and so I don't, without discounting what Syracuse has done, there's nothing so far that has told me that Syracuse is as good a team as NC State. Um, and I think that this is a game where I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't a blowout, but this is a physical. When you watch these two teams play, you're gonna be surprised at how physically dominant NC State might end up being.
Hmm.
Um, just because this is the difference between when you recruit better athletes consistently over time and when you recruit in upstate New York. So you add all that up, I don't see why NC State is a dog. Period. Really love NC State here. Oklahoma State, NC State, maybe parlay them.
I don't hate that. I'm leaning NC State plus 3. I am I am picking the over. 41.5 is very low. Neither of these teams have done. So let me phrase this right. Syracuse has not played a team that can score points aside from Purdue, and they still let UVA put up 20 and UConn put up 14. Outside of that, um, NC State has, with the exception of the past 2 weeks when they put up 19 and 20, put up at least 27 points against not awful teams. They put up 27 against Texas Tech. So this line being 41, I imagine each of these teams is going to score 3 touchdowns, and that's the over. So I'm going with the over on this. There's a chance I parlay NC State plus 3 and the over, but my pick for this game's the over. I don't see either of these teams holding themselves to 41.5, to be honest. I don't really have anything much to add aside from that these teams score points, and neither has really suggested that they have astounding defenses, unless you count Syracuse not letting Wagner score. Is the reason you need one like crazy college football play in this game for the over to hit. That's your
Yeah,
real over under.
probably.
So
You're right.
we finish up with USC plus 3.5 at Utah. Over under is 65. Kickoff is at 8 p.m. Michael, rat line. Rat line.
It is a rat line.
Real rat line.
It it doesn't make sense unless you say that it makes perfect sense and how little sense it makes. It's almost a self aware rat line because it's
Mm-hmm.
just slightly above. It's slightly more in the direction of Utah than even a rat line would be. Because if this game was 2.5, if Utah was favored by 2.5, you would say that's a rat line, and that the play here is USC is favored. Take Utah by a field goal. But at 3.5, to take Utah by a touchdown, it's so much of a rat line that it almost goes in the other direction. Like I almost go back towards USC. So I I'm staying away from this game because I'm so scared of it. Because I don't know what's going to happen. If you're asking me to break the game down from without any sort of spread, concerns, I think this is going to be a very interesting game from a storyline perspective because this is the game that we all circled on our calendars that if USC was as good as Lincoln Riley could make them in their first year, this is the game they were going to lose. This is Lincoln Riley's game that he loses every year to a team he shouldn't lose to on the road, and it's their best opponent in a very advantageous spot in Utah at altitude at night with that crowd. And you just harken back to last year watching Oregon go in there and get absolutely run out of the building
Yep.
by a much more physical team. But there's something about the way that USC has played in games that they should be in spots where they shouldn't play well. this year that gives you more confidence that they are playing with enough confidence to go out and win games like that. And Utah has really disappointed, especially this previous week. So the there are compelling reasons to say USC is going to be immune to this. I think the other reason that you could point to is that this is now no longer USC's biggest game on their schedule, which almost gives them a little bit more of a relaxed mindset going into this game, because they know that they still have a resurgent Notre Dame and UCLA on their schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if I were going to argue that Utah has the storylines with them going in this game, this now is their entire season. We just talked about it. They're not a playoff contender. They barely have a shot to make it into the Pac-12 championship game and to make it to a New Year's Six bowl, but they have to win this game. And
Correct.
and what it comes down to is if you're Utah compared to where you started this season, if you win this game, you can still say that there's some part of this season that was a success. If you lose this game, this season was a total failure from where you expected to end up.
Yeah.
So if you look at it that way, Utah has everything to play for in this game. USC could overlook this spot because they're no longer focused on Utah. They're focused on other fish. So I say all that to say I have no idea what's going to happen. I think this game from 3:30 to right into this game at 8 with the Bama Tennessee game to a much lesser extent, but this game specifically, I have no clue where this game is going to go. I'm staying completely away from it. It'll be a lot of fun to watch, and that's what I'm relying on.
Utah Utah will win this game if their defense shows up. The only good defense that USC has played was Oregon State. They only scored 17 points, but won the game 14-17. I lean Utah minus 3.5. I think the USC is a good team, but I think they're getting a little overhyped because of Lincoln Riley. And I think Utah might come out and show the world that they are still a pretty dominant team, and maybe they were truly in a look at. Who knows? But yeah, I like Utah minus 3.5. If the money line gets lower because there's public money on USC, if it gets lower than about like minus 130, minus 135, I'll probably bet that as well. But yeah, I like excuse me, I like Utah on this spot. I also kind of like the under 65.5. Um, I, when USC has played good defenses, the number was wildly under, and USC has had not had a line that is under 61.5, and that's the only like one of two times it's gone over this year. So I lean the under. I don't know that USC gets off the mat. I think they'll be amped up, but I don't think their offense is ready to handle Utah's defense. All right, that's all the notes I have. You want to get into picks? I only have 7 picks. Some
Yeah,
of
so
which we
I'll
covered.
run through quickly. So just last week went 5-7, 32-38 on the year, 45%. Not great, but we're trying to get it going in the right direction. Just a bounce either way from getting back to 500. So we're running out of time, but we got to make up 6 games somewhere. So here we go. We talked about the following games. I'm on Penn State +7. Might sprinkle the money line there. Bama, Tennessee, the under 65.5. Oklahoma State and NC State both +3.5 to 4.5, depending on what source you're looking at. Gonna take them both with the points and money line, possibly parlaying both. And then so for the rest of the games, we talked about Texas, great performance. Iowa State +16.5 going to Texas. Texas in a very large sandwich spot between Oklahoma State next week and Oklahoma this past week. Iowa State is not a good team, but they're a well-coached team that plays good defense. I like Iowa State to keep this within 3 scores. I also have some of these games are sprinkled in the middle. Maryland -11 at Indiana. Indiana gave everything they had to try to beat Michigan last week. They'll be out of gas. Maryland's a better team. I like them by 2 scores there. LSU Florida over 51.5. This opened at 48 and is now at 52. And that's not like this opened on Sunday and was at 52 by Sunday night. This opened at 48, was at 48 on Monday when the normal people who have actual jobs saw it. and it has moved 4 points since then. Which, and when you look at the way that these two teams have played, not a lot of defense, decent amount of offense. Take LSU and Florida. Both to get this over the number. No idea who wins. I lean LSU plus 2.5, and I have that as a may add because Florida has been nothing but mediocre since they played Kentucky. They've been totally out of rhythm. I do think LSU's performance last week was sort of an anomaly, so I have them as a may add. I'm still going back and forth on that one going into the weekend. And then my last actual play on the card, UNC -7. UNC covering and winning outright last week against Miami, going to Miami. They come home to play Duke, who everybody forgot about because they started 4-0 against a bunch of nobodies. And then they lost to Kansas, and nobody's talked about them since. UNC has the offense to go win this game. This is down the road. It's not a true road game. Duke Stadium is never full. Duke stinks. We hate Duke. Duke sucks. Fuck Duke. UNC -7. And then I have two other May ads. Stanford plus 17 playing Notre Dame. Stanford kept it close, surprisingly, sorry. Stanford kept it close with Oregon State. Brain's not working that well. They kept it close with Oregon State this past week in a game that I took Oregon State. They ruined the Oregon Trail parlay. I may add them this week because I don't think Notre Dame is capable of blowing anyone out. They beat BYU, which is an impressive win. They may have figured out who they are, but I don't know that they're capable of actually blowing a team out. So asking them to go win by 3 scores against anybody is a tall task. And everybody could say, but Mike, they blew out UNC at UNC. No, they didn't. They won by 14. And they got 2 touchdowns and 2 gift calls in the red zone. That would have made that game a lot closer had those calls not been made. So I add all that up. I say I may add Stanford plus 17. And then my other may add is Virginia Tech plus 7. This is the team, Miami, going to Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's not good. They managed to not cover against Pitt, despite the fact that game was like a 1-score game until the fourth quarter, and then somehow Pitt won by I think 21. But I don't know what's going on with Miami, but something's wrong because they looked in disarray at certain points against a UNC defense that I have obviously told everybody is horrendous. So the play there, Virginia Tech starting to show signs of life. Brent Pry has somehow gotten these guys up off the floor, despite the fact that they're really, really, really bad. I don't know that I think Miami probably still wins, but I think Virginia Tech in Blacksburg against a team they hate, and they hate Miami. They may be able to keep this within the number. So not sure if I'm going to add that yet, but those are my picks.
All right, I got Michigan -7. I said they're a contender. I think they are a contender. We will see. I think if they are a contender, they dominate Penn State, and I think that'll happen. I have Wisconsin -7.5 at Michigan State. Michigan State is fucking awful. And Wisconsin, having fired their coach, has something to play for because they're testing out whether they're going to go for a new guy or let this coach kind of ride things out for the next maybe year and a half and see how things go. So I like Wisco. The guys get up for them. They have something to play for. Michigan State might not score. Oak State plus 4.5 against TCU. We talked about that. BYU money line versus Arkansas. BYU is in a bounce back spot after a loss to Notre Dame. BYU not a good team. Arkansas also off several losses. I like BYU against the spread. I think Arkansas might spiral a little bit, and I think they have been spiraling. And I don't know that BYU is a bounce back. So I lean BYU money line. I'll probably take it and sprinkle it. Same thing with Tennessee money line against Bama. I know we talked about Alabama. That definitely, like I said, I believe I lean the under on that. I don't love Tennessee money line, but if Bama is going to lose before they play Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think it's this game, and I think a 1-loss Bama still does fine and gets to the playoffs. And then it's in Tennessee's court. Certainly a tough stretch of games, I think, but plus 200 on a team that's at home and is good and undefeated with a good defense against a injured and or not injured quarterback. I think that's an interesting play. Clemson -3.5 at Florida State. Best bet of the week. Florida State got overhyped, and Clemson got underhyped because of last year. Clemson might be a top 3 team in the league. I think Clemson probably beats Alabama if they play today. So I like Clemson -3.5. I think this is a 2-touchdown game. I don't see Florida State coming out. I know they'll be at home, so there's that. But I think Clemson comes out and dominates Florida State in this game. We talked about Utah -3.5 versus USC. It's kind of a rat line. I think USC bounces back. I think they win. I think USC struggles very significantly away at Utah with a good defense. And then I kind of a second best bet of the week. I have two last plays. Sorry, this is not the best bet. Tulane -12 at South Florida. Tulane's been dominant, with the exception of their loss at home during their homecoming, but they will look to dominate South Florida. They are a 1-loss team. They're doing that thing where they're like, oh, they might be ranked, and they're getting a couple votes. I think they'll steamroll South Florida, kind of go and show some people that maybe they're a Conference USA contender. And then finally, it's not a best bet, but it might be like a half best bet. I do like Mississippi State -4 versus Kentucky. Mississippi State at home. Those cowbells are annoying as shit. Kentucky might start to spiral a little bit. You see that in a lot of good SEC teams that just aren't great, where they hit a loss or two, and then in games they should be competitive, they're less than competitive. Whether that's the soul-crushing loss of defeat for one game, knowing that you're basically out of it for the SEC championship, or whether it's just mentality. Mississippi State, I think, could be a contender. I think Tennessee can be a contender. I think Mississippi State comes out and dominates Kentucky at home in a game they should win. So I'm a Mike Leach believer in that regard. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Nope.
All right, that's been our show. Thanks for watching. Tune in. Show every week. One for college football, one for NFL. We'll see you next week.